Carol walked into my house like she owned the place. No knock, no text, just marched straight to the front door on a Saturday morning, while Melissa was still at her yoga class. She was wearing that expression she always had around me, like I was something she needed to scrape off her shoe. She didn't even give me the courtesy of a good morning before launching into her announcement. Brandon, I need you to start packing. Tyler and Denise are moving in. They need the space more than you do. At first, I thought she was joking. I actually let out a short laugh, thinking maybe this was just another one of her passive-aggressive jabs. But she didn't flinch, didn't crack a smile. She just stood there with her ridiculous designer handbag looped over one wrist, acting like this was the most natural thing in the world. I stared at her for a second, trying to process the sheer audacity of what she just said. You're serious? I asked. She blinked slowly like I was the idiot here. Tyler and Denise are having a baby. They need room, and it's time you stop playing house in something that was never really yours to begin with, she said. That's when it hit me. She really believed the house belonged to Tyler. That all this time, 3 years of dinners, holidays, birthday parties, and casual weekend drop-ins, Carol, and probably the rest of Melissa's family thought Tyler had graciously allowed us to stay here. I don't know whether to blame Melissa or to take the blame myself for never correcting them. I paid for everything. The down payment, the mortgage, the utilities, even the stupid landscaping subscription she always praised Tyler for. And I let them believe whatever they wanted because it was easier than dealing with the look of disgust Carol always reserved for me. I kept my voice calm, but my jaw was clenched. Carol, I don't know what Melissa told you, but this is my house. I bought it. I pay for it. She looked at me like I had just farted during a church service. Don't be ridiculous, Brandon. Tyler put this house in your name for tax reasons. We all know that. You've just been staying here because Melissa needed some stability. But now that Tyler's expanding his family, it's time to move on. I almost laughed again, but I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She genuinely thought Tyler was some kind of benevolent landlord letting his little sister and her husband crash here like college kids. I didn't even know how to respond at first. I walked over to the drawer where we kept the important paperwork, pulled out the mortgage statements, and handed them to her. I didn't say anything. I just let her read. Watching the color drain from her face as she scanned those pages was the first time I'd seen her speechless. She flipped through them like maybe the next one would reveal some hidden truth that made her story make sense. But page after page had my name on it. Not Tyler's. Mine. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were sharp, almost offended. Why would you let us believe it was Tyler's house? She hissed. I shrugged. Because it was easier than fighting over every holiday dinner. Because I didn't care what you thought. Because Melissa said it didn't matter. I didn't say the rest. I didn't tell her that Melissa had begged me not to correct her family, that she said it would just make things worse, that Tyler had always been a golden child, and if I tried to take that spotlight away, even accidentally, it would blow everything up. So I kept quiet. I let them believe Tyler was the one responsible for all of this because it made things smoother. Until now, Carol straightened her spine, tried to recover that fake sense of authority she always walked in with. Well, be that as it may, it would still be the right thing to do. Tyler needs a space. Denise can't climb stairs in her condition. They'll be moving in next week. And you'll need to be out by Friday, she said, like my name wasn't on every legal document tied to this house. Like the roof I paid for last year was something I owed Tyler. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized nothing I said would matter. In her eyes, I'd always be the guy her daughter settled for. The placeholder until Melissa came to her senses. And now, with a baby on the way for the real star of the family, I was just in the way. I'm not going anywhere, I said, slowly and clearly. This house is mine. You can explain that to your son when he shows up with his suitcase. She stared at me for a long time, then turned and walked out without another word. No apology, no acknowledgement of the lies she clung to for 3 years. Just silence and the sound of the door clicking shut behind her. When Melissa and I got married, I knew her family was a lot to handle. I had met them. I'd seen the way they hovered around Tyler like he walked on water, how every conversation somehow looped back to one of his accomplishments, and how every family dinner revolved around what new car he was leasing or what business trip he had just come back from. Carol, my mother-in-law, had this tone when she talked about him, like she was reciting scripture. Tyler was the oldest, the golden child, the one who never disappointed. I could have cured cancer, and she would still find a way to make it sound like I got lucky. Early in our marriage, Melissa sat me down and said we needed to keep things simple when it came to her family. She said her parents, especially her mom, were old school in ways I wouldn't understand. They wouldn't be comfortable with the idea of her husband being the provider, especially since I wasn't some flashy entrepreneur or surgeon. I was just a financial consultant. Just like years of education, licenses, and 12-hour days building portfolio for other people meant nothing unless I wore a Rolex and posted vacation pictures from private islands. Melissa said it would be easier if they thought Tyler was helping us out, that he had bought the house, and was letting us stay there temporarily. She promised it was just a white lie to keep the peace. At first, I pushed back. Why would we pretend something so fundamental was different? But she pleaded, said it was just until we were more settled, whatever that meant, so it would avoid Carol's judgment, the lectures, the fake smiles, said it wasn't a big deal, that her family didn't need to know every detail. I agreed. Against my better judgment, I agreed. So when I bought the house, I let her tell them whatever story she wanted. Tyler was supposedly traveling for work and letting us stay here. Carol believed it, of course. Tyler the generous. Tyler the successful. Why wouldn't he lend one of his homes to his baby sister? Meanwhile, I paid the full down payment, handled the paperwork, signed every document. Each month, I transferred $6,850 to cover the mortgage, property tax, insurance, and utilities. I did it quietly, without recognition, while her family complimented Tyler on how humble he was for not bragging about owning this place. I swallowed it. It wasn't easy pretending. At every family gathering, I listened to her father talk about how proud he was that Tyler had helped us out, how it was nice that I was getting a chance to live somewhere decent. The way he said it made it sound like I was some charity case. Carol once gave me advice on how I could maybe look into a trade or certificate to get ahead, completely ignoring the fact that I had a successful client base and managed portfolios worth more than her entire retirement. Fun, it was exhausting, but I kept my mouth shut. For Melissa, that changed the moment Carol stood in our kitchen and told me to leave. Not suggested. Told. Like I was a guest who had overstayed his welcome in her precious son's house. That moment snapped something in me. It wasn't just about pride. It was about the layers of disrespect I had tolerated for 3 years, all because Melissa didn't want to rock the boat. I had sacrificed my dignity to maintain her image, to make her life easier, while she let her family walk all over me. After Carol left, I sat in that kitchen for a long time, staring at the walls I'd painted, the countertops I'd picked out, the appliances I'd paid for. Every square inch of that house had my fingerprints on it, and all it took was one absurd demand for the whole illusion to implode. I realized then that the lie we had told for so long had grown roots, twisted itself into something uglier than either of us had anticipated. It wasn't harmless anymore. It had become a weapon, and Melissa had handed it to them. After Carol left, I sat alone for a long while, not out of shock, but because I needed the silence to settle the fury boiling under my skin. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the coffee I had made earlier, the mug untouched, now cold on the counter beside me. I stared at it like it was somehow part of the lie too. Everything in this house, every square foot, every cabinet, every tile I had chosen, had become tainted by the weight of someone else's version of my life. A version where I was a guest, a placeholder, a footnote in my own home. Carol's parting words still echoed in my ears. Her condescending tone, the smug certainty in her voice when she told me I should move out with grace, as if this was her mercy, not her delusion. I didn't yell, didn't defend myself. I just told her, okay. Then I calmly walked into the study and pulled open the bottom drawer of the desk where I kept the important documents. I had a folder there, thick black, neatly labeled with my name on the tab. Inside were copies of the house deed, mortgage statements, payment records, insurance policies, tax returns. I had everything. Proof of ownership, 36 consecutive payments, all from my account, all tied to my name. No Tyler, no Melissa, just me. I placed the folder neatly on the kitchen table. I didn't open it, didn't flip through the pages. I knew exactly what was inside. It wasn't for me. It was for her, Melissa. She needed to see it. Not just the papers, but what they meant. For 3 years, she had watched me shoulder everything, never once stepping in to correct her family when they praised Tyler or talked down to me. At first, I told myself she was just trying to avoid the chaos. Then I believed maybe she didn't know how to fix it. But after today, I realized she never wanted to fix it, because fixing it would mean risking the fragile approval her family gave her, and that approval meant more than honesty ever did. When she walked to the door after yoga, she looked relaxed, scrolling through her phone as she kicked off her shoes. She didn't notice me at first, just moved the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and took a sip before finally looking up. I was sitting at the table, the folder resting in front of me. I didn't say anything, just waited. Her smile faded when she saw my face. "What's going on?" she asked, cautious, probably sensing the shift in the air. I waited a beat, then told her plainly, "Your mother was here. She told me to pack my things and move out." Her eyes widened immediately, hands tightening around the bottle. "What? Why would she?" I held up a hand. Don't pretend you don't know why." She said Tyler needs a house, that you two always said this place was his, and he's ready to move in with Denise and the baby. She didn't ask. She told me to leave, like I'm some tenant being evicted. She was already shaking her head. "That's ridiculous, she can't." But I didn't let her finish. I slid the folder toward her. Open it, she hesitated, but finally sat down across from me and flipped it open. The first page was a deed with my name printed clearly. Then the mortgage statements, each one with my bank's letterhead, each addressed to me. The next few pages showed proof of the wire transfers, my pay stubs, insurance paperwork, even the property tax records. I didn't speak while she read. I watched her eyes scan each line, her face pale and expression tightening with each passing document. She finally looked up. I didn't think she would actually, but I cut her off again. "You let this lie go on for 3 years. You let them praise Tyler for something I worked for. You let your mother insult me, diminish me, act like I was living off your brother's charity while I was paying for everything." She looked stricken. "Brandon, I just didn't want to deal with the drama. My mom has always been that way, and you know how she gets. I thought it was easier if I kept swallowing my pride." I interrupted. "If I just kept pretending I didn't hear the snide comments, the backhanded compliments, I let it go, Melissa. I let it all go for years for you. But this, being told to leave the house I paid for because your family thinks I'm squatting in your brother's spare property, that was a line." She went quiet. There wasn't much she could say. And honestly, I didn't want her apology. Not now. I didn't want her excuses or soft explanations about how she was trying to protect everyone's feelings. She had chosen silence every time her family disrespected me. And silence is just agreement dressed in politeness. I stood, picked up the folder, and walked it back to the study. I wasn't going anywhere, not from the house. But everything else, what we built, it wasn't untouchable anymore. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was cold outside, early spring, the kind of morning where the light hits the window just right and makes everything look sharper than it really is. I didn't sit with my coffee. I didn't linger in the kitchen or pace the house. I picked up my phone and called a premium moving company I'd worked with before through a client. They were discreet, efficient, and most importantly, fast. I told them I needed everything packed today, only my things, nothing else. The man on the line confirmed they'd arrive by noon. Then I called a real estate attorney I had on retainer. No small talk. I told him I needed to initiate the sale of my house immediately. I wanted the paperwork drafted, the listing prepared, and everything ready to go by the next morning. I gave him full access to the folder I'd shown Melissa, every document he'd need to prove clean ownership. There wasn't going to be any argument. There couldn't be. The house was mine, on paper, in payment, and in principle. By late afternoon, the movers arrived. I stood in the entryway and directed them through the process with a calm that surprised even me. There was no chaos, no yelling, no last-minute panic. I had mentally moved out the moment Carol opened her mouth the day before. This was just logistics. I took only what was mine, my clothes, my watches, my books, my monitors and laptop, my office equipment, the frame prints I had hung in my study, the cookware I had bought with my own money, the rare whiskeys I kept in the cabinet that no one but me ever touched. I didn't touch Melissa's things, not out of pettiness, but because I didn't need to. That house, and everything in it that wasn't mine, was part of the illusion she had built and protected. She could keep it. The master bedroom was oddly quiet without her there. I opened the closet, pulled out my suits and shirts, folded what I could, and let the movers handle the rest. In the bathroom, I packed my razor, cologne, and toothbrush into a leather dop kit. I didn't rush. I wasn't angry I was done. Before I left, I went back to study. The folder was still there, untouched from last night. I placed it neatly in the center of the desk, right where she would see it when she walked in. Then I pulled out a notepad, wrote a single note in my cleanest handwriting, and placed it on top of the folder. It didn't need to be long, just honest. Carol told me to leave Tyler's house. I've complied. The enclosed documents will clarify ownership. The house is listed for sale tomorrow. That was it. No accusations. No arguments. Just the truth. When I walked out of the house, I didn't look back. The movers were already loading the final boxes into the truck, and my car was packed with the essentials I want to keep with me. I gave the team the address of the new place and tipped them in cash. By nightfall, I was standing in a corner unit on the 34th floor of a downtown high-rise, floor-to-ceiling windows wrapping around the living room, the city lights flickering below me like static. The rent was steep, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in someone else's narrative. I wasn't playing a role. I wasn't keeping anyone's peace. I was home. The fallout was immediate and loud, like someone had dropped a bomb in the middle of a carefully arranged dinner table. My phone lit up before the movers had even finished unloading the last box. It started with Melissa. Missed calls, voicemails, text after text asking what was happening, why I'd left where I was. The tone shifted quickly from confused to frantic. Then came Carol. Her messages were less emotional, more accusatory. She demanded an explanation, insisted I was being irrational, that I was making a scene and hurting Melissa for no reason. Tyler chimed in shortly after, trying his hand at legal threats. He said I had no right to list the house, that I was breaking some kind of agreement. Though, of course, he never specified what that agreement was. Because there wasn't one, I didn't respond to any of them, not because I wanted to play games, but because there was nothing left to say. They weren't reaching out to understand. They weren't offering apologies. They were just trying to reassert control, to pull the story back into a version that made sense to them, where Tyler was a generous older brother, Carol the benevolent matriarch, and I was just lucky to be allowed into their perfect little world. Then Melissa showed up at my building. It was just after sunset, when the doorman called up to say there was a woman downstairs asking to see me. I told him to let her up. I wasn't hiding. A few minutes later, she stood in the doorway of my new apartment, eyes red, makeup smudged, still wearing the workout gear from earlier in the day. She didn't look angry. She looked wrecked. I didn't know what to do, she said the second I let her in. Her voice cracked, barely holding together. I came home, and you were just gone. I let her step inside, but I didn't move closer. I didn't offer comfort. I watched her take in the space. Clean, minimalist, fresh. A view of the skyline behind me. A half-unpacked box on the table. A new life already unfolding without her in it. I left you a note, I said, keeping my voice even. And the documents. I figured that was more than enough explanation. Her eyes filled again, and she started shaking her head. Brandon, this is insane. My mom shouldn't have said those things. I didn't know she was going to do that. I crossed my arms and met her gaze. But you were going to let her. You were going to let your mother walk into our home, my home, and tell me to get out. And you would have said nothing. I didn't know how to tell them, she said, that same old line that followed every lie, every excuse, every time she let them disrespect me and called it peacekeeping. They've always thought Tyler they thought wrong. I snapped, not shouting but firm, final. And you let them believe a lie because it made your life easier. You let them treat me like a placeholder in my own house. You sat through years of family dinners where they praised your brother for something he didn't do and acted like I was freeloading. And you said nothing. Tears slid down her face. But I didn't flinch. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just done sparing her feelings at the cost of my own dignity. The house is going on the market. I continued, calm but cold. It's already in motion. The attorney has everything he needs. I'm done pretending. I'm not covering for you. Not anymore. You want to explain to them what happened? Do it. Or don't. It's not my job to fix this. Not after everything. She didn't try to argue. She just stood there, silent, broken in a way that might have moved me once. But that moment had passed. I had lived in silence for too long, letting someone else's comfort dictate my worth. Now I was living for myself. And that meant letting the whole illusion burn. The house sold faster than I expected. Cash offer, full price, 30-day close. No negotiations, no contingencies, no games. Just a clean break. I signed the final papers with a kind of quiet satisfaction. Not the vengeful kind, but the kind that comes when a weight finally lifts from your chest. It was over. That house, the one I had built, paid for, maintained, and quietly defended for 3 exhausting years, was no longer tied to people who had treated me like a guest in my own life. Melissa had barely spoken to me after that night at the apartment. I think she knew it was done, even if she couldn't admit it yet. But a few days after the sale closed, she called. Her voice was small, brittle. She asked if we could meet, and for once, I said yes. She came by late after sunset, and I could see she hadn't been sleeping. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she sat across from me on the couch like she was sitting on the edge of a cliff. "I need to tell you something," she said. She didn't try to apologize again. She didn't cry. She just started talking, and for the first time, I saw the full shape of the lie she had been protecting. "Tyler never bought the house," she said quietly. "He told Mom he did. Said he was putting in a down payment. He even took $35,000 from her. Told her it was to cover it. But he never used it. He blew it. I don't know where. Investments, gambling, something stupid. I never saw the money again. When you bought the house, he begged me to let him pretend it was his. Said he just needed time to pay her back. Said if Mom found out, she'd never forgive him. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, watching her finally lay it all out, like a confession she'd been holding in so long it was starting to rot inside her. I let him take the credit," she said. "I told myself it didn't matter, that it was just temporary. But then every time we went to dinner, and Mom would say how proud she was of him, I just let it keep going. I didn't know how to stop it." She looked at me then, eyes wide and raw. I didn't think it would go this far. But it had. The lie had spiraled so far out of control that Carol, in all her self-righteous arrogance, had tried to evict me from the home I had paid for with my own money, my own work, my own life, and all to protect the illusion of her perfect son. The aftermath was a slow-motion implosion. Once the documents were in her hands, copies of the deed, the sale records, the final transfer, Carol had no room to argue, no room to pretend. She was humiliated, not just because she had believed a lie for years, but because she had weaponized that she'd walked into my house with her nose in the air and told me to get out, completely unaware that the entire foundation of her confidence was built on a story her son made up to cover his own failure. Ray, Melissa's father, was furious, not at me, but at Tyler. From what I heard, he didn't even speak for the first 5 minutes after Melissa told them everything. Then he stood up, walked out of the room, and didn't come back for hours. Later, he called me, not to ask for anything, just to say he was sorry. I didn't respond. There was nothing left between us. That bridge had collapsed a long time ago. Tyler, for his part, went silent. No more threats. No more messages. Just embarrassed silence. And Melissa's youngest brother, Zach, apparently laughed when he heard the full story. Actually laughed out loud and said, "Wait, so Mom tried to evict the actual homeowner because Tyler blew her money years ago." I couldn't make this up if I tried. The family fractured after that. Trust doesn't survive that kind of exposure. Not when pride and image are everything. And as strange as it sounds, I didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't revenge. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted my dignity back. And I got it. Melissa wasn't ready to let go. After the dust settled, after the house was gone and the truth had peeled every layer off the fantasy she'd helped build, she came to me with one request: a second chance. Not just a conversation or a plea to rewind time. She wanted reconciliation. I told her I wasn't opposed to rebuilding, but only under conditions that were non-negotiable. I wasn't walking back into the same dynamic. Not as a husband who had to stay quiet to keep the peace, not as someone expected to tolerate lies for the sake of appearances. I told her if we were going to try, everything had to be on the table. Transparency, hard lines, and professional help. She agreed. That's how we ended up in the quiet office of Dr. Elaine Wexler, a sharp, middle-aged therapist who didn't waste time with warm platitudes or sugar-coated observations. From the moment we sat down, she cut through the noise like she'd already read the entire script. The first session wasn't easy. Melissa cried before she said a single word. I sat stiffly, trying not to let old anger harden into something unmovable. Dr. Wexler didn't coddle either of us. She looked at Melissa and said, "You didn't just lie to your husband. You made him feel disposable in his own life." Then she turned to me, "And you allowed it for 3 years. Why?" Session after session, we unpacked everything. The favoritism Melissa grew up under. The way Tyler had always been a star, while she learned to survive by avoiding conflict. The invisible rules her family lived by, where silence was loyalty and performance was love. Dr. Wexler tore those systems apart piece by piece. And for the first time, I watched Melissa not just admit the damage, but understand it. There was one session that stayed with me. We were discussing the night Carol came to the house. Melissa said quietly, "I didn't think she'd actually go that far." Dr. Wexler asked, "And if she hadn't, Would you have ever told the truth? Melissa looked down at her hands and at me and said, I honestly don't know. It hurt to hear, but I respected the honesty more than any excuse she could have offered. It wasn't all therapy, though. One afternoon, weeks into the process, I got a text from Carol asking to meet for coffee. My first instinct was to delete it. I didn't know her anything, but curiosity got the better of me. I chose a spot in a public place. Quiet enough to talk, visible enough to keep the interaction from turning into anything dramatic. She was already seated when I arrived, a mug of untouched tea in front of her, hands wrapped around it like she needed something to hold on to. When I sat down, she didn't smile. She looked tired, not in the way people look after a bad night's sleep, but in the way people look when a lifetime of certainty has cracked beneath them. For a moment, she just stared at the table. Then she looked at me and said, I'm sorry it wasn't offensive. It wasn't laced with explanations. She didn't blame Melissa or Tyler, or try to pretend she was the real victim. She just said, I'm sorry I made you feel like a stranger in your own home. I'm sorry I didn't see what was right in front of me. And I'm sorry I believed a version of events because it was easier than facing the truth about my son. I listened, and when she finished, I told her I accepted the apology. But I also told her things would be different now. There would be boundaries. I wouldn't be showing up to play the grateful son-in-law while people whisper behind my back. I wouldn't be absorbing anyone's discomfort to keep the family happy. She nodded, said she understood. I think, for once, she actually did. It didn't fix everything, but it was a beginning I could respect. 3 months after everything collapsed, Melissa and I bought a new house. Smaller, more modern, tucked into a quiet neighborhood that didn't come with anyone else's name or history attached to it. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. It wasn't about square footage or status anymore. It was about intention, about clarity. The deed had both our names on it this time, and the process wasn't silent or one-sided. Every conversation was open. Every expense was transparent. Every decision was made together. We weren't trying to recapture the past. We were starting over, on level ground. There were still hard days. Trust, once cracked that deeply, doesn't seal clean. But we kept showing up. The house felt like something we were building in real time, not just physically, but emotionally, room by room, foundation to ceiling. No one was pretending anymore, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. Tyler's handwriting on the envelope was messy, like he hadn't decided whether he actually wanted to send it. Inside was a long apology, though it read more like a confession tangled in self-defense. He admitted taking the money from Carol, admitted lying to everyone, said he never meant for it to get that far, that it spiraled out of control, that he was ashamed of how he handled it. There were paragraphs filled with rationalizations, how he felt pressure to live up to expectations, how he thought he could pay it back before anyone noticed. But somewhere in the middle of all that, there was a line that caught my attention. I know I didn't just betray them. I disrespected you, and I let you carry the weight for a lie I created. I didn't respond. I didn't tear it up either. I just folded it back into the envelope, placed it in a drawer, and left it there. Some things don't need closure. Distance was a real answer, and I was comfortable with that. Zach, surprisingly, became the one person from Melissa's family I could tolerate without effort. He had this dry, relentless sense of humor that cut through the tension like a knife. During a small gathering one evening, he raised a glass and said, "Here's to Brandon, the only man in the family with a real mortgage and actual receipts." It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't meant to be. He didn't pretend to defend Tyler. He didn't try to rewrite history. He just called things what they were. And for that alone, I found him easier to be around than the rest of them combined. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. It turned out that removing toxic noise from your life does wonders for your clarity and energy. I landed 2 major clients back-to-back, built out my team, and expanded our services. I didn't have to grind for validation anymore. I wasn't operating from a place of needing to prove my worth to anyone. I already knew what I brought to the table. What I learned from all of it, what stuck with me more than the arguments, the lies, or the long nights in that empty apartment, was something brutally simple. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. I had tolerated silence. I had tolerated disrespect dressed up as tradition. I had tolerated lies because confronting them seemed too messy. And every time I let something slide, I gave them permission to keep going. But once I stopped tolerating it, once I drew the line and walked out the story they wrote for me, everything changed. My voice came back. My sense of self sharpened. And what remained was Rael's olive mine.